Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the STP training webinar today, which is Supercharge Your Functional Tests with Visual Powers in 8 lines of code. Our speaker for the day is Tayar. I'm Smita Mishra, a professional tester myself, and I'm excited to host you all and Gil on our STP trainings. He's an evangelist and senior architect at Applitools and a very well-respected professional in the industry. Before we start with the webinar today, I have few updates for you. The first one being, we have our next conference coming up as STP Spring 2018, STPCon, which will be held in the Newport Beach, California from April 9th through 12th this year. Our program committee has selected a range of world-class speakers across the keynotes, workshops, and the sessions. And you can view the entire program on stpcon.com under the event schedule. The conference topics, as you can see on the screen, include automation, agile, performance, DevOps, mobile, security, leadership, strategy, and so much more. And we typically have over 20 workshops and over 40 sessions for you to choose from. And the formats are like roundtables, case studies, hands-on exercises, and tool demos. Incidentally, our speaker today, Gil, is also presenting 2 exciting sessions at the conference. So, Gil, do you want to share with us briefly what are the two sessions that you're going to talk? What are they going to be about?
So the first session is the session that I'm going to present here, and the second session is about Docker and its uses in staging environments as an alternative to the usually very horrible staging environments that people have in their companies. I'm trying to list an alternative that uses Docker and Docker technologies for that.
So did you also get a chance to review the event schedule, Gil, for the upcoming program? And did you find any particular ones that you are looking forward to attend?
Yes, it was very hard to pick up 2. You asked me to pick 2. So I picked 2 that are very close to my heart and concern the shift left and shift right movement that is at the base of the agile methodology. And the shift right is why you should be testing in production by Greg Seipold. I'm a huge believer in testing in production because agile means constantly pushing to production, sometimes the only production. And the second is code to drop to smoke test in 12 minutes, which talks about shift left and the ability to run your tests as close as possible to those developer pushes. So those are the 2 of my favorites.
Very nice. I'm myself also a big fan of Greg Seipold's sessions, so looking forward to that. All right, so this is another update for you guys. If you have already registered for the conference or are planning to do so, then you may want to also quickly book your rooms at the Marriott Hotel, which while they're still offering their special rates, which is $199 per night. And the offer ends on 16th March, which is only 2 days away, or until the rooms sell out. So if you are looking for a stay, please make sure you book it quick. Another quick piece of information that I have for you here is this upcoming webinar, Testing for Accessibility and Inclusive Design by Michael Larson on 28th of March, again the same time. Michael is a senior quality assurance engineer at Social Text, but that is such a, it's a very minute description for his work. He's very highly engaged with the testing community on various forums and is hugely loved and respected by all in the community. The link is up for you to review and register, so please go for it. He will also be speaking at the conference, so if you want to look up his sessions and workshops. And if you are on Twitter, please share the conference information and about this webinar with your STP followers and connections. Please do add STP's Twitter handle on your tweets, which is at SoftwareTestPro. And you can also add hashtag STP webinar to your tweets. We also have Gil's Twitter handle here if you want to talk about anything he said. And right before we start, a few housekeeping points for the next 1 hour. All the attendees shall remain muted through the webinar. You can type in your questions and we will take them up after Gil is done with his presentation. The webinar will be recorded and posted on the SoftwareTestPro site for the attendees to go through later. All right, so let's get started with the webinar today. A very warm welcome, Gil, again. We are very thrilled to have you with us today. And let me quickly introduce you formally for all of us on this webinar today. From the olden days of DOS to the contemporary world of software testing, Gil was, is, and always will be a software developer. He has in the past co-founded WebCollage, survived the bubble collapse of 2000, and worked on various big cloudy projects at Wix. His current passion is figuring out how to test software, a passion which he has turned into his main job as an evangelist and senior architect at Applitools. He has religiously tested all his software from the early days as a junior software developer to the current days at Applitools, where he develops tests for software that tests software, so which is almost one meta layer too many for him. All right, Gil, very warm welcome again, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Good evening for me and noon for you, everybody. I'm going to talk about functional tests, but enhancing them with visual powers. So let's start. I already got in my introduction, so I'll skip that. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I'll prefer to skip that. First of all, let's discuss what exactly are functional tests. Let's discuss first of all what are functional tests, because a lot of people define tests separately. There are so many kinds of tests. We're talking about unit, visual, contract, browser, acceptance, end-to-end integration. The list goes on and on and on. It never ends, it seems. Not only that, everybody has their own interpretation of each of those. I think the only one that is not controversial is unit tests, and even there I get sometimes different interpretations. So let me define my interpretation of functional tests, and even if you don't agree it, please accept it for the context of this talk. So functional tests for me are automation tests that automate the browser or the mobile app in order to test the functionality of a web application. First of all, we automate the browser, and second, we test the functionality, and which means testing how an application performs, whether it works correctly, basically. So let's start by writing a functional test. I've already live coded in sessions. It's always a gamble. I have my backups ready, but let's see if I can make it. I will be writing in JavaScript and Node.js. I'm a huge fan of this language and of this ecosystem. It has a huge library. The whole thing of DLL hell is gone. You can have multiple versions of the same library. Very simple interfaces, constantly improving. And the important thing for me with JavaScript is that all the cool new automation frameworks are in Node.js and in JavaScript. If we're talking about Cypress or Puppeteer or Test Cafe, they're in JavaScript. And the reason is very simple. The front-end developers there. It is their language. And when they write automation frameworks, they write it in JavaScript. So if you use automation frameworks in JavaScript and if you code in JavaScript, you can work with the front-end developers, share code between you, and even work together. So let's write a functional test in JavaScript. Obviously, I already have the scaffolding for that. And I have my live coding instructions, which I will put here, and which I hopefully will almost not. First of all, let's install some libraries. I'm installing Mocha, which is the library I use for the tests, the framework for the tests. And obviously, I'm going to use Selenium WebDriver for automating the browser. It's still the most popular web automation driver out there. While it's being downloaded, I will create the scaffolding for Mocha. So I have my own scaffolding for that. And there we go. And I'm going to test a blog application, which we'll see in just 1 second. And we have in the blog application, we have a register page, which enables a user to register themselves. So it should show an error if the email is empty. That's we'll start with small and continue there in a nice manner. So first of all, I need to bring in Selenium. So I will take the imports, and for purposes of time, I will copy paste. I will take the imports. We're requiring Selenium WebDriver, we're requiring Chrome driver, and we're bringing in all kinds of stuff from the WebDriver that we'll use in a second. And then we're initializing it. we're initializing Chrome driver here. In the before and the after, which means before all the tests run and after all the tests run, we will create a a web a driver equals new WebDriver build for Chrome, and in the after we will quit the driver so that it will close Chrome. Perfect. Now this we should start by opening the browser in the correct page. This is a functional test, so we first of all have to get to the page. Once we got to the page, we can start automating. And the first automation we want to do is get the username field. Get the username field using CSS selector, using a CSS selector. So I go to the field which is input and find the element and send it a username. We will do the same for the password field. And we've created a username password. We will leave the email blank just because we want to see the error. But first of all, we have to make sure that the page is shown correctly, and we are waiting until the page is shown correctly. So we do a driver.wait until we have the username element on the page so we can be sure that the page is correct. But first of all, I skipped a little. Let me run the application so that we can see it correctly. So I'm running the application. Obviously, in automation, the running will be handled separately, but here I'm testing the same application. In the same package, I'm also writing the tests and the code for the application. And we'll go to localhost 3000, and there we go. We have a blog where we can register. And well, let's see what happens when I click in a username, leave the email empty, and click in a password, and click on the sign up. I get an email can't be blank page on the screen, and this is what I want to check when I get there. So let's go back. Now we need to click on the page, on the button. Click the submit button. I find the submit button and I click on it. Perfect. This should do the actions, and I call them actions. We'll see in a second why. The actions that make the story that I'm writing. And now I need to do the validation. Check. First of all, I wait for the error message to appear in this line. And then I find the error messages and expect the text to include an email can't be blank message. That's it. We have a functional test. It's very small, obviously, but it is fully functional. Now, if the gods or demo are okay, we will npm test it. This runs the application using Docker, runs the Mocha test, this test, and then kills the Docker. So we're running the Docker, the application is being tested, and the test passes. Woo, we're good. Now let's just make sure that the test passes not because it does nothing, but because it does something. So let's make it fail by making it look for email can't be blanks. So let's do that. We'll run the test. This time the test should fail. So I'm trying to show here that I'm not doing a sleight of hand. And this is the real code that is running. There we go. The test failed because it couldn't find email can't be blanks. Perfect. We have our functional test. Yay. And let's go back to the presentation. Now, what we've seen here is a very, very simple test. It checks one thing and one thing only. This is more for unit tests, integration tests, etc. Usually functional tests are more like stories. They don't check one single thing, but they check a long, long list. They check a user story that we want. It's usually a very long story. And why is that? Because functional tests need to set up users and blogs and whatever. And if we do that for each and every single small test, we will be wasting a huge amount of overhead. So usually all functional tests are stories, and they all will look like this. Do some action, check that something is correct. That's a validation. Do some action, validate it. Do some action, do some action, do some action, validations. All functional tests, more or less, look like this, either actions or validations. Let's write a functional story. Let's write the functional story, um, the next function story, and we'll use it in the continuing. First, I'll explain what I'm doing, and then I won't write it because it's a long time, but we'll see how it looks. So first of all, I'm creating some utility functions. Instead of writing always await driver.find element, await driver.click, etc., we'll write one for waiting for, which waits for an element to appear, set text, which sets the text of an element, click, which clicks on an element, and get text, which gets the text of an element. These are the utility functions I write. And let's start by doing the sign up. The sign up is as we saw, but this time we're going to let it pass. We have four actions: setting the username, setting the email, setting the password, and then clicking on the sign up. And it looks like this. First of all, I do a driver.get, go to the home page, go to the register page, and then set the text. I set the username text to a username, the password to a password, and the email to an email. There we go, to an email address. And finally, I click the button. Now, as we can see, there's a problem here, and the problem is the selectors. Selectors as in input placeholder equals username. What's the problem here? The selectors are fragile, meaning that if the developer changes how they implement this form, the selector may not be valid anymore. So this is the problem with the fragile selectors. And if we use the same selector again and again, it will be problematic. And the answer to the fragile selector is usually what is called a page object. Instead of directly writing the code and directly writing the selector for each and every place we want to use it, we create an object that has methods for all of the actions that we want to do. For example, register user. And in that register user, in that page object, we will have those selectors. This is a common practice, best practice. I'm not inventing anything new here. And it's the best way to ensure that the fragile selector problem doesn't appear in our code. I'm not going to use this way of writing. We're just demoing actions. I think for me, the more important thing is the validations. So we'll continue having the actions be simple. Now, once the user registered, they get to their own home page. And the home page is an empty home page, and we need to validate that. So we choose three things to validate. We choose to validate that the Your Feed tab is active. We choose to validate that if there are no articles, it's written no articles are here yet. And we choose to validate that the username is a username. After that, we'll click on the new post to create a new post. So these are three validations that we want. We could have chosen lots more validations, the popular tags, the home, the conduit, lots more, but these are the three that we used for now. And this is the code. We wait for the page to show up, and then we validate the username, validate the articles list by using getText and checking the preview, and validate that the active tab is the Your Feed tab. Perfect. Now we can create the publish an article. We set the article name, set the article description, and we set the article itself, the content. And we have three tags here, A, B, and C, and we click on publish. And this looks very simple. We click on new post, wait for it to load, and then set the text of the article title to a title, something wonderful, write your article, etc., etc. And then we set the tags using a for loop. We set three tags, A, B, and C. And then click on the submit form. Now we need to validate. We get to the blog post page, and we need to validate. So again, we choose to validate the article title, the username here, the description, and the tags. And then we add a comment. Again, we're not validating everything. We're not validating this thing. We're not validating that there is a delete article here and an edit article here, but it's good to go. So this is the validation. We expect the title to be a title. We expect the article content to be wonderful. And we expect the tag list to be A, B, and C. That's the validation. Now we add a comment, as we saw, just set text and click. And we validate the comments. Again, we choose a minimum validation. We validate this field and this field. We didn't validate the icon here. We didn't validate the date, for example. And this is how the validation looks like. In the interest of time, I think it's exactly the same as the others. Now we log out. We just go to the settings page, click here to log out. And this is how it looks like. We go to the settings page, wait for it to show, and we click to log out. Logging out will bring us to the home page of this blog. And there's a lot of things to validate here. We need to validate the popular tags. We need to validate that there's one post and the username and the title and the content and the tags of that blog post. A lot of things to validate. And not only that, we need to click on the article, go to the blog page, and validate that also. So this is the code, and it's starting to become scary. And we're not even validating everything. If we really wanted to validate here, we need at least 3 times as much validations, as much get texts or get whatever. So we validate the author and the title and the text, etc., 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 etc. Let's do that. Let's write the code. Well, we're not going to write the code because it's a lot of code. We'll just check out the branch, and we can see here functional test and step 2. There we go. And we can see all the code that we've seen here: register user, validate user homepage, publish post, etc., etc. Okay, let's run it. Test, run the test. Hopefully it passes. Perfect, it passed. Now, we've seen the problem with the actions, the fragile selectors problem, and there's a lot of complex code going on. And we found a solution, page objects. It's not a perfect solution, but it's usually good enough. The big problem from my point of view is the validations. The validations also have a fragile selectors problem. They have a complex code problem, a lot of complex code, and much, much more than the actions. And there's too much to validate. If I really, really want to validate stuff, I have to write a lot of code. And the checks are only positive. We don't validate what we don't know about. We only validate what we know about. Let's take the last point. Only positive checks. Let's insert a bug. Let's insert a bug into our code. And the bug is this. I'm going to go into the code of the application, and I'm going to say, when I'm submitting the register page, I will clean up the username. That means that if there is an error, the username will be not the previous username, but blank. Now, this is a bit artificial, obviously, but this could happen. Now I'll create the application. I'll compile the application because we changed it. There's a small bug. Oops, there we go. And I will run the test. Okay, we've built the application, and I will run the test. Now, will the test pass or will it fail? Because the validation just checks that there's an error message, it's not looking at the other fields. So what will happen is that it won't work. Oh, yes, the gods of demo are not with me today. Okay, let's try it again. And if not, we'll continue. I will rebuild the whole thing. Is there an error here? Nope. And npm test. Nope, the gods of demo are not with me today. Okay, so assume that it works, and I'll figure out why it doesn't work later, but let's assume that the test worked. The test would not have failed because we're not checking the other fields. We're checking only the error message. We're checking that there's an error message which says the email can't be blank. We're not checking the other things. And that is a huge, huge problem with validations that are specific. So, and this is, if there's one thing that we should remember from this webinar, is that actions should be focused, but validations should be holistic. They should check everything. If they're not checking everything, bugs will slip through. Here, see? And I found nice things. Actions should be focused, validations should be holistic. But how do we do that? How do we solve the validation problem? We can't check everything. We can't check something that we don't even know about. So how do we solve the validation problem? How do we make them holistic? And the answer is, what else is holistic in our world? And for me, the answer is vision. If a user saw that register page, the user would immediately, or the tester would immediately see that the username was blank and would report that bug immediately. Unfortunately, we can't add testers to an automated test. That's not possible. Well, maybe one day we'll make us all miniaturized and run inside automated tests. But currently, that's not possible. So how do we do that? And the answer is we replace humans with image diffing. If we had an image, if we had the screenshot as it should be, and every run we'd compare the screenshot with whatever actually happened. If the screenshots are the same, then we're good. If the screenshots are different, then there's a bug somewhere. And that's an important thing. If we compare the screenshots, we're comparing everything that is on that page. So let's do some live coding and do add visual testing. So first of all, let's remove npm run build and remove that bug. Okay. And we'll add an image comparison library. This image comparison library is called Chai Image Assert. It works with Mocha, and it knows how to compare images and throw an error whenever the images are different. Okay, and we'll add it to our code by requiring it. There we go, now it's inside. Now we're going to change very, very slightly the code that initializes the browser. And why are we doing that? Because before, we didn't really care about the size of the browser. Well, what do we care? It's small, big, as long as the functionality works, we don't care how it looks. But now we're comparing screenshots, so all the screenshots have to be the same size. So I'm choosing this size because then I don't have to scroll. I see all the page. Great. Once we've done that, all we need to do is take the existing assertion. Where is that? There we go. We have an assertion that's that checks the specific field, and we change it to taking a screenshot here. This is the taking the screenshot, transforming it into a buffer. This is a Node.js thing, not very important, and expecting it to match image registration blank. And we'll see where that appears. So let's run the test. npmt is the shortcut for npm test. Hopefully, the gods of demo will be with me. And they are not. Huh. Let's check out step 3. Okay. Hopefully, please. Oh my God. Let me do a quick check here. Let's do something else. I will clean the install directory, the node modules directory, and I will reinstall everything. Just a sec, it should take about 30 seconds. Okay. Rebuild it just to make sure. And npm test. Oh, thank you. That's the equivalent of restarting your machine. And the test failed, which is good. Oh, thank you. The test failed, which is good, because it created it created this. This is the screenshot we have where we put in the username, we put in the password, and it got an error. But it doesn't have the expected screenshot. It doesn't have the baseline to check against. So we'll copy it and run it again. Oh, it failed again. I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, but it should work. So I'll skip this and we'll continue back later. And the important thing is we've replaced one check, which is getting the text of the error message and checking just one thing, validating just one thing, with a validation of all the screenshots. And that's theoretically, you should say, hey, we've just replaced one line with another line, but it's a lot more important. This is much better than one line replacing another. Why? And let's look at the problems we had with validations. The fragile selectors problem is gone because we're not doing any more selectors. We're just taking a screenshot of the whole page. We're not checking each field separately. Complex code is gone. The same validation, which is taking a screenshot and comparing it, is the same code for all validations. So there's no complex code here. Is there too much to validate? No, we don't care. We validate holistically. We validate everything. So even if there's a lot of things to validate, we're validating them all. And only positive checks? No, we're validating everything. So if the user had blanked that username field, the developer had inserted a bug that blanked the username field, we would have caught it because we check everything on the page. So, and this is important. Now we're talking about functional validations and visual validations. Functional validations are when we check a specific field or specific fields for specific values. Visual validations is when we take a screenshot of the whole page. And functional validations are very focused. They check only specific things or a set of specific things. Visual validations are holistic. They check everything. And we've changed this validation code into this validation code, which is much, much simpler. And the more important thing, when we have lots of validations, when we check the blog homepage, and we had lots of validations, and they were just a subset, we've changed that into very simple click, check, and we're done. We've taken all the validation code and made it simple by using one line. We've solved the problem with validations. And this is great. Now our code looks like action using page objects, obviously, action, screenshot, action, screenshot, action, screenshot. The problem is that when we're taking the screenshot and comparing it, we're doing it very naively. All open source projects that do image diffing, comparison of bitmaps, are naive. For example, browsers tend to have very, very small differences between how letters are written because of things like anti-aliasing. So Mac is a bit different from Linux, a bit different from Windows, even in the same browser. And if we have different GPUs, I have a gaming machine, so I have a very powerful GPU, and somebody else has a laptop with a very simple GPU. Even if it's the same browser, same operating system, we will have differences in the bitmap. So when I run the tests, I will get everything is fine. But when another developer runs the tests, they will get a problem, even if there is no problem. What about date time? If the page has date time, then we have regions that from day to day are different, and it's okay that they are different. We need a way to say, I'm sorry, can you please ignore this region when you're doing diffing? And what about full screen versus viewport? When I'm taking a screenshot, I'm taking a viewport, only the visible part of the page, but I want full screen. And if I have a page that is very lengthy, I can't make the browser too long. Comparing, in essence, is a pain. I have to find out where the problems are. And accepting a new baseline, let's say I didn't find a bug. It was a real change in the application. Accepting that new baseline is a big pain because I have to copy copy from the actual folder to the expected folder, rerun the test, copy from the actual to expected, rerun the test until everything is fine. It is a real pain. Which is why there are today various cloud-based solutions that do diffing in a much, much, much nicer way. And for the purpose of this presentation, we'll be using Applitools. And let's do it very, very quickly. Okay. There we go. Let's look at the functional test this time. First of all, we've added a new before and after. Immediately after initializing the browser and quitting it, we've added a before which initializes the eyes SDK, the Applitools eyes SDK, which we've required previously. Here, we've initialized it with our Applitools API key, which is part of the environment. I won't be showing it to you because it is my Applitools API key. And we're opening eyes. This tells Applitools on the server we're running a new test. And the only difference here is instead of comparing using the previous library, we ask eyes to compare the window. Eyes will take a screenshot and then comparing it using the base image name. The check windows are exactly the same. We didn't change anything. So let's run the test. And in the meantime, I will log in to eyes. I'm already logged in so that we can see. Oh, wait, nope. We need to do a small change. I'm going to create a new test so that it will be totally new. Oh, and I haven't installed Selenium. And we're going to run it. Oh, no. The gods are dim. Oh, I'm good. Okay. For a second there. There we go. The test is running. I have a very bad internet connection, so it will be a little bit slower. And one test passed, and the other test passed. Let's go look in Applitools eyes. There we go. We've passed the test. Applitools sees that there is no baseline. This is the first time that the test is running in Applitools. So it says, okay, if there's no baseline, this is okay. We can obviously check the pages and look that they're okay. Now, if we run it again, it will pass. But let's do something very, very quickly. We'll change the header. And instead of home, we will change it to start here. Create it, and very, very quickly run the test again. What happened here is they changed the header. I didn't inject a bug. I injected a real change to the code. And I injected it in the worst place possible. And that worst place is the header. And why is that the worst place possible? Think of a story that has hundreds of actions and hundreds of validations. That will mean we will have hundreds of screenshots, which is a real problem if you're changing the header, because the header appears in all of those screenshots. So a very small developer change translates into a change in all of the screenshots, which means that we will need to go over each and every one of those screenshots to verify that that was the only change. Oh, sorry. There we go. So we have problems, you can see, and you can see in the small thumbnails that they're all problems in the header. And we can see here that it's exactly the home changed to start here. And you can see cloud-based solutions have much better visual comparison engines than the naive open source ones. But we have a problem. Let's say we have hundreds. This is a small win. Let's say we have 100. What do we do? And the answer for a lot of for Applitools eyes is click on the grouping. What the grouping will do, it will look for similar changes to all the screenshots, and it will group them. So this is a set of 3 screenshots that all have the same change, which is the change here. And these 3 have a similar change, but in another location. This is for logged in users, and the other is for anonymous users. And now, once we see that, we can accept all these screenshot changes, accept all of them here, and now we have a new baseline. So, to summarize, how does one supercharge your functional tests? And the answer is replace the validations. Replace the functional validations with visual validations. First of all, you write the code that issues action after action. You create a long story using page objects or whichever method you want to solve the fragile selectors. You can even use a recorder like Selenium IDE or one of the new cloud-based ones. Once you have that, you just intersperse your code with check window, check window, check window, check window, wherever you want to do the validations. And you can use either open source solutions or cloud-based ones. Once you do that and accept the first baselines, your validations will work as you want them and do it holistically instead of focused validations. And you get 2 for the price of 1. First, much simpler validations. And second, you get for free a visual validation of your page. You can catch visual bugs that you couldn't catch till now. So thank you very much. And if there are questions, I will gladly answer them.
Hey, Gil, thank you so much for this insightful session. Yes, there are questions, and we're going to take a few. However, is it okay for you if we ask the attendees to reach out to you with their questions, because there seem to be like quite a few of them?
Of course,
Okay,
definitely, not a problem.
sure. So let me take up a few of them here. So the first question is, so the attendee is wondering, why are we using CSS and not IDs? Or if IDs are not there, then regex XPath.
Oh, I just took, a sample a blog application from the web, something that, is used for all various kinds of purposes. And there was no ID there, no nothing. So I used whatever I could to use those selectors. Obviously, in a real application, you would use real IDs or really, really good solutions to solve that fragile selector problem. That's one way to do that, is to communicate with the developers on which IDs are used on which fields. This is just a sample, yes.
Okay, thank you. The another question is from Nabil. He says, does the image comparison library works with Selenium Java using Applitool library?
Yes. Applitools has lots of SDKs for the various languages: JavaScript, Python, C#, Java, Ruby, I think, and they all use Selenium WebDriver and know how to do the check window and everything. Yes.
Okay. The next one is, what is the equivalent Maven library for Java-based tests?
I frankly don't remember. I'm sorry, but if you go to the Applitools page, you will find all the information there. There's a long list of SDKs. If you click on the SDK, you will get the exact information.
Okay. So maybe they can all visit applitools.com, right?
Yes, applitools.com. By the way, this presentation, you can see on the screen, you can see the link to the presentation and the GitHub repo where all the code is.
Yes. Um, Okay, so the next question is, how about small UI differences between different browser? Aren't those triggering false failures?
If you use naive image diffing, then definitely. If you're using cloud-based solutions like Applitools, what Applitools does is it creates different baselines for different browsers. So the baseline for Firefox will not be the same as the baseline for Chrome. And then you won't have the false negatives that you would with naive solutions. Yes.
Okay, so the next question is, with image diffing approach, this is from Pooja. So Pooja says she has seen teams struggling with managing base images. What is your suggestion?
I definitely agree. I mean, image diffing with open source tools is fine for, unit tests and various kinds. But if you have stories with hundreds of screenshots, definitely go with the cloud-based solutions. And there, the whole baseline management is using a GUI, and it's much nicer. And you have all various kinds of capabilities to do that in the UI itself.
Okay, there's another question that says, how do you register with same name and email address again and again?
Oh, good question. Because I'm in control of the application, I'm running the Docker, and if you come to my talk about staging environments, I will talk about that. I'm running Docker with the application, so it's starting from an empty database, a database with no users. So in this case, I could do that without a problem.
Okay, I'm going to take this one as okay. We still have 2 3 minutes, so we can go ahead. How do we bypass dynamic content?
Ah, in Applitools, and in my naive image diffing solution, there is no way to do that. But there are image diffing solutions, open source ones, that let you specify a rectangle which says, please don't compare inside that rectangle. Applitools allows you to do the same thing, or you can even use the GUI to just select the parts where you want to ignore. It's called an ignore region, and Applitools will ignore that region. So you just select all your dynamic content as ignore region.
Thank you. The next one is, I'm using Selenium using Java and Cucumber file. How this will be implemented in my case?
That shouldn't be a problem. Cucumber is a wonderful tool that enables you to write in an English-like language, but in the end, it's just I think it's JavaScript from what I remember, but I'm not sure. But we have integration with Cucumber, and I've seen image diffing solutions that also integrate with Cucumber. It shouldn't be a problem. It doesn't really matter which test framework you use. Cucumber, Mocha, Jasmine, Jest, JUnit, NUnit, whatever. All these tools integrate with all of them.
Okay. Uh, Gaurav Bansal asks, any guidance how to use image comparison on highly dynamic sites like e-commerce or news sites?
Yes. Well, if you really want dynamic, for example, checking the product pages of lots and lots of pages, where you don't want to compare against the baseline because you have hundreds of thousands of products, let's say, then in that case, no image diffing will solve your problem. Uh, Applitools, because its algorithms are AI based, we have a mode which is called layout mode. Layout mode ignores the text in the images and looks just at the layout of the page, and thus you can check hundreds of product pages without checking their dynamic and ignoring their dynamic content. So that will do it for you.
Mm, okay. So can we mask part of screen to ignore invalidation?
Yes, yes. As I said, there are ignore regions, both in more complex image diffing solutions, open source image diffing solutions, and definitely in tools like Applitools Eyes.
Okay, Gil, there are so many questions and so many coming
Mm.
more. So,
Yes.
what we're going to do is ask the attendees to also reach out to you to ask the questions
Perfect.
directly. Yeah. And
Perfect.
yeah, so thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. I'm going to take away the control from you. Okay. So, well, everyone, this concludes our webinar for today. Thanks everyone for joining, and more importantly, thanks for being so engaging and making the most of the webinar for yourself and for the whole group. If you want to see more of demos and learn more about Applitools, you can probably visit their site, and Gil has also shared the links for the GitHub. So, and definitely come over to STPCon Spring 2018 to learn more about this session. Thank you, Gil. Thank you so much for the session.
Thank you, Smita.
And for those who plan to attend the conference, please again don't forget to book your rooms at the Marriott Hotel while they're still offering their special price. And as you can see, the special price is going to end on 16th. So make sure you do that. And stay tuned for more webinars and online trainings coming soon at www.softwaretestpro.com. And if you haven't signed up yet for the upcoming webinar, which is Testing for Accessibility and Inclusive Design by Michael Larson on 28th of March, the link is up for registration. Please go ahead and do that. All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week ahead. And see you all in California in April 2018. Have a great week ahead. All of you, keep learning.